kind of get amused looking at that interview because I kind of balked at the beginning there when I was trying to say to Russell Maryland, your old Miami Hurricanes, you guys kind of had, and I wanted to kind of get at, you kind of had an in-your-face attitude. In other words, they kind of had the Teddy Roosevelt big stick policy of football. But I didn't know if he'd find that an insulting or not, so I kind of balked there because I really wanted to see what kind of hospitalization coverage my company has before asking a former Cane a question he might regard as an insult.
Well, you might be in trouble if Michael Irvin were on the show, but I think Russell Maryland seemed pretty calm.
Wasn't he a great guy?
Great guy.
He really impressed me, particularly in the areas you talked to him about helping young people, so on and so forth. He was first class all the way.
Absolutely. Great interview, Russell Maryland.
Well, Judge, we talked about Plano West. Plano West picked up a, I guess you would say, heroic win. Among other things, you can almost say a biblical win against South Garland, where they really had to come up with a gut check those final 6 minutes. And the hope now is that they use that kind of confidence they build for the next couple of weeks, or actually the rest of the season, but they keep building on that kind of confidence. But we had two other Plano teams in action, and they certainly had their day last week. Good weekend for the Plano ISD.
Boy, they really did. Plano ISD was 3-0 last week, going into this week. And, Kevin, we were at the Plano-Mansfield Legacy game, and I don't even know where to begin with that.
Well, we can start out by saying Plano was good. Plano is a viable threat to win the district, and if they're a threat to win this district, they're a threat to win the state, because this is a great district. But Plano looked incredible to me. I mean, their quarterback just looks outstanding. They've got so many weapons they can go to. Defensively, they looked outstanding. But here's what really, really impressed me. When they were up, I think, 56-7 with about, I'm going to say it was about midway through the third period, they could have gone on and won that football game 100-7. But Jadon McCullough really showed what a class guy he was. First off, he had the second and third teamers in there. I mean, they were practically shopping the stands for subs to get in there. I am surprised they didn't put us in the game, Judge.
I thought they might.
And, they were getting to that point. And then he ran nothing but simple off-tackle plays to let those folks from Mansfield get out of there with some respect.
Well, and what was fun is he even had a couple freshmen in there that were playing at running back and quarterback, if I'm not mistaken, we talked about. And they are great talents coming up. And, Plano Mansfield just looked overmatched.
It was.
I mean,
we called it Rocky versus the Russian, and it was something of that nature.
It really was. And, sadly, it even reflected in the crowd. The Plano fan base just was huge that night, as it was just a sea of maroon. In fact, if you go on YouTube and catch some of our footage of the Planoettes moms and dads tailgating, I told them, I said, this is converted from John Clark Stadium to Wildcat Stadium tonight because of all the maroon that rushed in on the home side. But defensively, the Wildcats were sound. Offensively, the Wildcats were sound. In fact, the only thing Jadon McCullough had to say was, we need to work on our extra points because we missed an extra point.
Got to get on Kevin Merrill for something, boy, because he's doing about everything right. And as we've said, I know that maybe perhaps right now, to equate him with a guy who's starting for Nebraska, Rex Burkhead, may not be quite accurate just yet, but boy, he heads in that direction each week, showing indications that he too was going to be a major college player one of these days.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He played super well against Irving MacArthur, if there's such a thing as super well, and against Mansfield Legacy. Again, it looked overmatched. It just really did. And Plano showed why they're ranked in the top 10 regionally, and why they probably will have a berth into the state tournament without much problem, is they are so talented on both sides of the ball.
Well, a lot of hurdles and puddles between now and then, but right now they're looking pretty good. Now, Judge, while Plano was doing that, across town, Plano East had a tough one with Keller. Then all of a sudden, they busted it open and ended up winning a blowout.
They did. In the first half, it was nice that we were able to turn that game on and watch it while we were also watching the game down on the field. In the first half, it was a tough score. It was 14-13 or 16-14 going into halftime, and Plano East was scraping and scratching and clawing to keep into the first half. And then in the second half, it just seemed to kind of unfold for Keller as Plano East just kind of rolled down the field. There were 2 catches of over 20 yards made by Plano East offense. They scored on one of those passes, and then they had a run back for 96 yards. as well for a touchdown, and they just kind of took over the football game.
They certainly did. Well, I'll tell you what, we got some college picks, some pro picks we'd like to do, but before that, Judge, you got a message for us.
Well, I do. The message would be that, folks, if you would like to have a part in what we do here in the show, Kevin and I were doing this for the first time with PlanoISDSports.net. Please feel free to email us at PlanoISDSports@yahoo.com. If you have any suggestions or any questions you'd like answered on the next show, Kevin and I will entertain those, and we'll bring those forward. If you have any program ideas, shoot us an email, let us know. We're really excited about being able to not only shoot Plano ISD and feature Plano ISD, but also take you around District 85A and kind of introduce you to what our opponents look like and what they're thinking and what they're doing. And so if you have any suggestions or questions, please let us know. Hopefully our next shoot will be either Flower Mound, Marcus, or Hebron, as we've got those games coming up as well, and talk to the quarterbacks from the 3 senior highs here in Plano. Please email us at PlanoISDSports@yahoo.com, or you can go on Facebook and talk to us. The Kevin and the Judge Show is what the Facebook account is, and we'll have a Twitter account set up here pretty soon, too.
Okay, what about our games coming up this week?
Games coming up this week. Well, Kevin, let's look at the first game this week. You and I fared pretty well. You went 5-1, only dropping that Indianapolis Colts game, and I went 4-2. My Longhorns prevailed over BYU 17-16, and then Georgia almost beat South Carolina, but I lost those 2 games. So this week we're going to start off with the Texas game. Number 23 ranked Texas travels to UCLA, Kevin.
I think they get beat on the coast. Johnny Mac Brown went out there a few years ago and lost something like 66-20 or something of that nature. But I think Texas is a little bit too young to go out there on the coast and, pick up a win over a Pac-10 team. Now, Texas, I think, is a project in the works right now. A young team, and I don't think they're capable of going out on the West Coast just yet. UCLA, obviously not a great team, but I think they're good enough to beat Texas.
Well, I'll tell you, Kevin, I paid the price for picking against my Longhorns last week, so I'm going to roll with the Longhorns this week. I'm going to say their defense is going to stifle that very fast Pac-10 UCLA Bruins offense, and it's going to be a defensive battle, and they're going to win the battle. All right, so we've split that one. Kevin, the next game is the University of Louisiana Monroe versus number 23 TCU, and I picked this game because of the surprise that Baylor paid to TCU early on in the season.
Well, I tell you this, I think University of Louisiana Monroe stands a chance of beating TCU would be about like if Hurricane Irene hit the state of Montana. I mean, it ain't going to happen. TCU wins in a runaway.
I agree. I'm going to go with TCU and a big score in that as well. We've got number 1 Oklahoma versus number 5 Florida State.
I don't know if this is a heartfelt choice or not, but I'm going to go with Jimbo Fisher in Florida State. I say a heartfelt choice as I dealt with Jimbo Fisher when he was an assistant at Auburn, and I was working in Alabama. I thought he was one of the nicest guys you could ever hope to meet, really, really down to earth. So maybe it's just because I'm pulling for him. But I've seen his team in action. I think they're going to be awful tough. I think they were embarrassed by OU last year, and just like TCU, or I should say Baylor was embarrassed by TCU and wanted to have at them again, I think Florida State's going to be going in there with that a little bit of an attitude. I think the whole Tallahassee community is laying for the Sooners to get down there, and I think the Sooners are going to have an awful tough time going into Tallahassee and picking up a win, and I don't think they're going to do it. I think Florida State's going to win.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kevin, they're going down to Florida State territory. They've got something to play for. Oklahoma's got something to prove with that number 1 ranking, but I'm going to have to agree with you. I think a little jet lag is going to set in, and maybe some too over-seasoned alligator, and it's going to be Florida State taking the victor over Oklahoma. All right, next game, we have number 21 Auburn versus Clemson. And Kevin, I picked this game because Auburn just has been a very awkward football team this season.
Awkward and winning. And until somebody beats them, I'm not picking against them. Now, it's going to be tough to go into Death Valley and beat Clemson for anyone. However, Auburn has figured out a way to get it done 2 weeks in a row now. They could just as easily be 0-2 right now, but they're not. They're 2-0. They figured out a way to get it done, and, their confidence is such until somebody reverts that confidence and gets them believing that they're a mediocre football team, I think they're going to keep winning, and I think they're going to beat Clemson this week, even though it's in Clemson.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think that Death Valley is going to be enough. I agree with you. I think the drive is too short, and there's not going to be enough distance to lull them to sleep, and so I'm going to pick Auburn as well. And then the last game, and I picked this one because it's a Big 12, but Kansas versus Georgia Tech. Kevin, neither team is ranked, but both teams have impressive 2-0 starts to the season.
And I'm going to go with Georgia Tech in Atlanta.
I'm going to go with Kansas.
Okay.
I'm sticking with the Big 12 on this one. I think that Kansas has got a defense that is going to be tough for everybody in the Big 12, and I think that they have a shot to sneak into the Big 12 tournament. So I'm going to go with Kansas on that. Now let's go to the pros, Kevin. Let's turn our focus to the pro teams. Last week we split. You split. You got the Dallas game right. Jets beat the Cowboys. I thought in the first half the Cowboys were going to make you look like a fool.
In a runaway, I thought they were going to win it.
I did too. And it didn't happen. And then Indianapolis lost to Houston without having Peyton Manning at the helm. So this week we've got Dallas, Houston at Miami, and Dallas at San Francisco.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to go with Houston, and I'm going to go with San Francisco out there. Now, Houston, I don't know. I get a good feel about the team. Dallas, I don't know how to put it any other way than they're so shaky. For example, they should have won that game by 2 touchdowns last week. But once again, they figured out a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And I just am at the point where I don't have enough confidence in Dallas right now to bet on Dallas beginning with a capital D. I mean, somehow or another, they just are at a stage where they seem to not have that confidence and don't do what needs to be done to close the sale, so to speak. And so I'm going with San Francisco.
I'll tell you what, Kevin, Dallas has all that talent. It's like having the child that is genius but never lives up to their potential. And that's what you have. DeMarcus Ware had a monstrous game. The defense looked monstrous in the first half. The offense looked steady in the first half. Then all of a sudden they just gave it away.
Well, with the exception of 2 plays, I thought Tony Romo looked outstanding.
Absolutely.
And so, but those 2 plays killed them, a fumble and interception.
Yeah.
So
turnovers will get you. So I'm going to go with San Francisco. I think they've got something to prove after Sunday. But I'm going to take Miami against Houston this week because I think that the New England Patriots are just one unbelievable football team. And really, the Miami Dolphins played with them the whole way. It's just that, you know what? Tom Brady was on fire and threw for over 500 or over 400 yards and broke his own record. And finally, it was 5 touchdowns, was it? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to go with Miami because they played with New England all the way through.
Okay. All right. That'll about do it for us and the Judge.
It does, Kevin. I'll tell you what. I'm excited. I can't wait to see whose record runs up the more wins next week as this weekend of football comes to a halt. And then look forward to our rest this weekend. We don't have to travel to North Mesquite.
No, we won't be doing any games this weekend. We do have a big one to do the week after that, though, Plano and Allen. But I'll tell you what, why don't we look forward to seeing you people next week at this time. I'm Kevin, this is the Judge, and we're back at you again next week.